Welcome to the Haven Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders, owners, and professionals are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Hear from industry experts on everything from marketing, leadership, financing, and more. Brought to you by Haven, a co-working space where you can connect, create, and get stuff done.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Haven Hubcast. I am Nancy Sheed, your host, and I am honored, truly honored to be here with Annie Lamont. Annie is the co-founder and managing partner of Oak, I'm going to say HCFT. Did I say that right, Annie?
That's right. Healthcare Fintech.
Healthcare Fintech. Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. We're excited to chat today.
I'm really happy to be here with you, Nancy, and it's so great what you've done at the Haven.
Annie, we're kind of here to chat about sort of all things in investing, which is a major sort of part of what you've been doing in your world and your career and part of your legacy. And again, also with regard to Haven and entrepreneurship and investing and everything being part of their model. So can you sort of take us back to your beginning days in learning to be an investor or venture capital? You've been in it for quite some time now. I'm sure it looks different. Is it something you always wanted to do?
Well, I didn't know in college that I wanted to do this, but it was my second job. My first job, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I cured myself of that in 6 months as a paralegal defending a very guilty client. What I was actually doing was creating the first file-based litigation system, taking 600,000 pages and actually putting it in this Data General mini computer, and it was a case against Data General. And it was funny because they had stolen trade secrets. So it wasn't amusing. And I decided after 6 months, wait, I'm having more fun with the engineers. I don't really want to defend a guilty client. And so I ended up being in the middle of Silicon Valley in the early 80s and joining an investment bank venture capital firm, boutique firm in San Francisco. And the first 3 months I was there, we took Apple public, and I was carrying Steve Jobs bags on the Apple IPO roadshow, and we took Genentech public, and Bob Swanson and Steve Jobs, probably two of the greatest entrepreneurs of the last century. So I had an amazing first experience, and I just thought I could spend the rest of my life and career working with these incredible entrepreneurs that are changing the world. Like, that's what I want to do. So that's what really directed me into venture.
Wow. And how, Annie, through your career, you've been with Oak Investments, and then kind of specializing in the healthcare and the fintech space. How did you sort of, that grew in that capacity, but is there a sweet spot in the venture capital? Like, was it the getting so close to such entrepreneurs? Was it sort of changing industries? Was it the seeing what others couldn't see in companies? What was kind of the hook for you in terms of having vision? Was it the holding space? Was it the being the connector? What are some of the skills that you brought to the table that made it interesting and fun for you?
Well, I think I found initially healthcare, a space I loved. No one else was doing it at my firm initially. So we were establishing a new practice in originally life sciences. Now I just do software and services in healthcare. And, we had fun when I joined Oak initially. That was the year that we founded Genzyme. And so I got exposure to the industry and decided, one, if you're going to do well in something, it's nice to have your own expertise and differentiate yourself. And most everybody else was chasing after hardware and telecom hardware and disk drives and things I wasn't as interested in. So first go after something you really love and you're passionate about. And then, secondly, finding your own thing and being the expert in it, super helpful. I think as far as my own career, it is as opposed to investing in public companies where it's transactional, this is really about relationships, and it's about assessing people and working well with people. And it's about being a therapist, entrepreneur, and supporting them in good and bad times. And so I think that the relationship-based nature of it suited me. I loved it. I've backed 3, 4, 5 companies with entrepreneurs over 30 plus years. It's just been it's just really rewarding and satisfying. So I think the relationship side, the people side, and frankly, like, yes, being a connector, I think has been helpful, during my career. I think that pattern recognition that one develops over time, it takes a long time to build a great company. And I think that, sticking with it, sticking with entrepreneurs, like just being a problem solver, helping make things work, as opposed to being a critic from the sidelines, is all a very important part of it.
I love that. I want to talk about the fun. And I love that you come back and you're like, it's a long time. It's not all fun. Like, yes, there are some fun parts, Nancy, but let's also be real. Like, this doesn't happen overnight and we don't snap our fingers. You talk about that that healthcare, nobody was doing that. And now you're kind of at this interesting crossroads of healthcare and fintech. Both of these are industries that a lot of people would run for the hills, right?
Mhm.
Like, they're ripe for disruption. They have been disrupted. They continue to have kind of crazy highs and crazy lows. Can you speak to sort of how you went in, I mean, sort of how you, from the healthcare layering over the fintech,
Mhm.
and what makes those two industries appealing to you at this time when,
Sure.
like I said, I'm not sure a lot of people would feel like those two are so exciting.
Yeah, no, I think, look, healthcare is 20% of the economy. Fintech, you could say, is about the same. I mean, these are an enormous part of the economy. And I actually think there's an advantage. They're two highly regulated industries and they're very complex. And I think that complexity and actually understanding the regulatory environment is what can give you an edge.
Mm.
And then staying with it, because I think there have been tourists that come in and out of healthcare that see when it's really exciting and people are talking about digital healthcare and people jump in, and then markets, are challenging, and then they jump out, they find something that feels easier to them. And so I think there is really an advantage to staying with it, to understanding an industry deeply, and to, creating a competitive moat in what you're doing. But I think, like, healthcare, we're on a very long journey to trying to fix a broken system. And so on the healthcare side, we just have financial misalignment in the industry, right? When you've got somebody that's getting the service that's not necessarily paying for the service or the majority of it, and then you have somebody else paying, and you have obviously 50% of it's paid by the government to Medicare and Medicaid, you come up with all sorts of misaligned incentives. And so I think we're focused on getting those incentives right. We can talk about that.
You diplomatically described other ways of how I've described that industry personally from personal experience, but the misalignment being a very democratic way. But when there's misalignment, there are opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also noted, Annie, that you were sort of not just investing in healthcare to invest in healthcare, but now there's another layer of what you attach your outcomes to when you're
Mm.
looking at these companies. And I think that goes along with just looking at the future and a brighter future. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I did start in life sciences and biotech and pivoted in 2000 with the investment in Athena Health to software and services. And it was very deliberate. I mean, obviously, advent of the internet, we thought would change things, but it was more about seeing cost, increasing costs, and one, how that eats away into what government spends on other things, on what consumers can spend on other things,
Mm.
and just what a challenge it is. And two, just nobody actually knew when people are referring doctors to you, it's often about patient experience, not actually about outcomes. And, I think our whole mission has been, and for the last 20 plus years in healthcare, to lower costs, improve outcomes, and patient experience. And if you're aligned on those three things, then you're not as worried about government reimbursement, where it's going, because you're doing the right thing. You're on the right side of the angels. And I
Mm.
think it is very important to actually consider costs when you think about treatments and outcomes. If you match outcomes and quality with cost reduction, they're often very much aligned, because it means that it's like fact-based, decision making in healthcare.
Mm.
You're aligning what a provider is doing with thinking about the long-term outcomes of a patient and what they get reimbursed in total as they think about taking care of a patient. And, they get reimbursed based on outcomes as opposed to just fee for service doing things.
Mm. You make it sound so simple.
It's
You make it sound so simple. There's hope. And I want to also touch upon, you're also seeing ahead and touching in categories that not just are healthcare, but are specific in healthcare that we typically wouldn't see associated with the words IPO. Words like hospice and mental health. You seem to be looking at the whole picture, not just pain, ache, cure, right? So speak to how that sort of more holistic, if you can, holistic approach has come into your being or come into your sort of ethos of investing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we all, in all segments of our lives, we touch the healthcare system. And I think there is this somewhat misguided notion that only the not-for-profit world can do it well and have our best interests in mind. And I think the reality is, if you look at where innovation has come from in healthcare, it's almost all come from the private sector.
Mm.
I think there is confusion in terms of decision making and for-profit and not-for-profit, because if you think about decisions that are made at not-for-profit hospital systems, let's just take that as an example, every decision is made by a for-profit doctor in the sense that they are going to make more money when they do things. And so it is not because the entire system is not-for-profit that they are going to be only looking out for your well-being. We're all commercial beings, and I'm not saying that doctors are not doing the right thing, but I would say that I see very little behavior difference between a not-for-profit provider and a for-profit provider system, because the decisions it's really about how you incent those doctors. And in essence, most doctors are incented to increase revenue. So there's just those are the decision makers that are within a not-for-profit hospital system. So that's the same. I think something like hospice, we did back the first for-profit hospice company. And I think it's very important when you're backing an entrepreneur in healthcare that they are mission driven. Really, you cannot invest people who are financial people that see this as a way only to make money.
Yeah.
As opposed to they're going to be change agents in a system too. And it's not about what's the latest reimbursement scheme coming from CMS and how can I take advantage of that? I mean, certainly there are PE roll-ups where people buy derm practices all over the country. And then it's about private pay and how can I move that up and make more money doing that. We're very much about models like hospice and palliative care, which are incredibly important moments in people's lives. And they actually dramatically reduce cost as well as increase the improve the patient experience, right? I mean, it is between caregivers, family, and individuals. We just felt at that time that hospice was something that needed to be built out in America in a way that was, better, faster than what was necessarily happening in the smaller not-for-profit way. We felt like palliative care with a company called Aspire years ago. Nobody was focused. I mean, for 20 years, I looked at something where you're looking at the last year and a half of somebody's life. And, I've been through it. We've all been through it. I mean, I had, my in-laws and my parents. And one year I was in the hospital 7 times, in the ER because people kept calling 911 from from Edge Hill or wherever my parents were, Waveney. And that is not a great experience. And they shouldn't be in the hospital at that moment. And we had a company, Aspire, that literally had an algorithm which told the insurance companies which people were most likely to pass in the next 12 to 18 months. And then we would call those families because they could see that they were experiencing a lot of engagement with the healthcare system. And we would, individual Aspire would call those families and caregivers and say, we have a free service that's, paid for by the payers. And we will support you. Just know that we'll come in and do an assessment. We will have nurses on call. We will have palliative care doctors on call. And when you have a crisis, call us and we will help you through it as to what should happen, could happen. And if the right thing is to go to the hospital, great. But if you don't want to be in the hospital, which most people don't want to be in the
Mm.
hospital, they certainly don't want to die in a hospital, then we'll help you and support you staying at home. And, their NPS score was almost 90% because caregivers loved it, patients loved it. And nobody's saying to you, like, you're going to die in the next year. It was more
Yeah.
like, these are people that are most likely to be passing, and they're experiencing a lot of pain and difficulty, and their caregivers and their families are. So I loved it. It's a win-win-win approach. And this has now become actually a more standard practice. CMS now has a reimbursement code around it. But, if Aspire hadn't been there to actually create this model, it probably wouldn't exist.
Yeah. I've always said it's an industry that totally needs a rebrand, just because it gets a bad rap. And once as you said, once you've been through it, you're like, wait a second, if I'd only known, or if I could share from this experience what I knew, how I would do things differently. But it's one of those, as you said, we're all going to go through it, or we all have been through it. And I love how you've just sort of modeled that somebody was ahead of the curve to see, like, this could be different. This is how it could be different. Is that also what's happening in mental health, or did mental health have to become a crisis for the industry to pay attention? I'm curious how that's evolved and how you've seen that.
Yes. And I think I think that most people truly understand that mind and body are not separate. And, our mental health, obviously, there was more talk about it during COVID. It was the only positive that probably came out on the healthcare side is that, there are two positives. One, virtual care. People discovered they could do it. It's amazing. And two, that mental health, was a crisis, is even more of a crisis, particularly with children, and that it's a really important topic. And I think there's been more pressure on, payers to pay for it. And the problem is we really just don't have enough therapists, social workers, et cetera, that are engaged in practice to support people. And so, trying to figure out models where you can leverage people at the, working at the top of their license in order to help people is really important. But I also think people that would not have necessarily gone for care are now more, it's, hopefully destigmatized in many ways, and that people are willing to raise their hand more and say, I've got an issue and attend to it. We're talking about 20% of the population will have mental health issues at any one time in their life.
I love that you're sort of you're on the front lines, as it were. What else, not necessarily investment advice, but what else are you seeing? What excites you? I mean, in speaking with you, you seem hopeful. You were optimistic.
Oh, yeah.
What are some other things that are in your space that you're looking at that you're excited about? I mean, how is AI playing into your world? Is that something that's kind of disrupted, or did you already have your eyes on it? Just sort of curious what the vantage point looks like from where you are.
Sure. Yeah, I think AI, we look at it like Excel, 25 years ago. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. It's an automation tool, right? And so we have been using AI. We were using more Gen AI. We're looking at it for existing companies. We're looking at it for my own firm in terms of just doing things smarter. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful in clinical practice in terms of just like call center administration. It's interesting. It's being used in dentistry right now. And mostly we think of it as administrative efficiency, rev cycle management, things that don't even touch patients. But a great current example right now is there are a couple of companies that are providing AI in dentistry, and it's being adopted, and dentists love it because they're actually looking at scans and looking at x-rays and finding things that dentists aren't finding in terms of bone loss and cavities and other issues of the mouth. And they're finding that their patients actually are actioning those decisions more than they were when just the dentist says, we think you have an issue. And so when they see it actually shown, someone's using AI and they're reinforcing what the dentist is saying, you're talking about 15% more uptake in terms of actually follow through and like, oh, I really do have a problem. I need to attend to this. So I find it fascinating where that's a case where dentists feel like they're leveraged. that it's showing, it's demonstrating more efficacy as a diagnostic with patients. Yeah, very real today.
Very exciting. And again, I feel like you've got your magic wand that you're kind of sort of your magic ball that you're crystal ball you're looking forward. And a couple of things you are a strong advocate, obviously, for Connecticut, for women. I was in speaking with Allison Malloy earlier. She commented that there were times when you two were the only ones in the room looking at deals. Can you share with listeners sort of your journey as being a female investor, of also being a proponent for Connecticut? And I know that's sort of where you and Haven came to sort of cross paths.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I looked around when I was at my old firm, Oak Investment Partners, and realized after 30 years that there were very few women in the industry. And I think when I started my own firm, Oak HCFT, with my partner, we both, he's a male, but we wanted to change that.
Mm.
And I think the challenge was there weren't enough women in the industry that were senior to pull from. We did bring in a female general partner who had worked with a company, worked with us as one of our portfolio companies in the past. But other than that, we knew we had to grow female venture capitalists. And so we do have a mix. We're equal opportunity. We're just looking for the best people, but we have grown a number of women. And so our firm maybe is more than 50% female now. That isn't just in talent and marketing and IR. That is, the investment professionals. And so we're very excited about it because we brought in a number of phenomenal young women that are growing their careers, and they're going to make a difference. And I do think over the course of the last 9 years, we're in our 10th year actually at our firm, the industry has more than doubled the number of women in it and the number of female partners. So it's still, you're talking about 15, 16% of the industry being female. So it's absolutely pathetic. But, having come from 5% 10 years ago, we are making progress. And our investors, LPs are are helping with that because they're looking around rooms saying, where are the women? I think private equity, we're venture capital and growth. I think private equity is still very slow on that front. And so in general, the buyout firms need to make more progress on that front, and I would chide them to do so. When Ned was elected governor, I did go to a Connecticut Innovations meeting, and I looked around, and Allison was standing next to me, and I was like, where are the women? This is crazy, right? It was all these men who'd been in industry that were really, that were happy to sort of write checks and be early stage investors and interested in what Connecticut Innovations was doing. And yet the women weren't there. And so we did drive towards a mission of, creating Tidal River, organizing. We did a lot of meetings and lunches, and even through COVID, kept that going, where we collected women who were interested in this topic and demystifying it, right? Because this does not have to be in finance. I don't even consider myself a financial person. I consider myself somebody who's loves people, understands talent, wants to be inspired, and understands deeply these markets that we're going after, fintech and healthcare. It's not so much a financial game. It's not that complex from that perspective. And I think we wanted women to know that. A lot of these companies that Tidal River will be interested in are they're B2C companies. They're companies that are most women drive healthcare, consumerism. All the choices, whether it's what insurer you're working with, to what services and what providers you use, they're generally driven by women. Most consumer purchases made by women. So, I just think there's so many areas that we actually understand better than men because it's in our daily lives. And financial services the same way. We all, payments is involved with everything we do. E-commerce infrastructure we invest in. Who's involved with e-commerce? Probably women more than men. So I think it's just a natural. Women can be natural investors, and that's why I was chagrined to find out that so few women had entered the industry, and we needed to change that.
Well, we've talked to the Tidal River team, and so I'll link those in the notes because of the great work that they're doing. And I think it's a great way to sort of bring us to a close, even though I could talk to you all day and ask a million questions, is being an advocate for, as Haven is, for sort of women empowerment, women centric. This isn't about anti-men, but it is about creating community, looking forward, sustainability, supporting entrepreneurs. And that's just something that you have been a model for in your career. So thank you for sharing your time and experience and for being part of the Haven community. If people are interested in connecting or learning more about Oak or the work with Tidal River, what's the best way to reach you or find out more?
Well, that's a good question. Probably going through the Tidal River team is maybe the best way to go, or Allison. I think, and I certainly, I'm happy to show up at Haven too and talk to a group of people there. But, and I'd say go to the Tidal River events I'm often at and can directly interface with people there. And that's fun for me.
Super. Thank you again for your time. We'll check back and see what other companies you're disrupting or forging ahead with in the healthcare and fintech. But thank you for your time, Annie. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Well, a pleasure's all mine, Nancy. Have a wonderful holiday.
Thanks for listening to the Haven Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders and owners are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Haven is a co-working space and virtual community located in the heart of Fairfield County, Connecticut. Haven is a hub for business owners and professionals to connect, create, and get stuff done. Find out more about the Haven community online at haven.com. That's HAYVN.com. Haven Hubcast is produced by Sound Advice Strategies.